Hi, this is going to be a short video on primary sources. Primary sources are the creme de la creme, the excellent, the top of the line of research. And so I'm going to encourage you to include a little bit of primary source work, if you can, in your papers. In a usual research paper, such as might get published in an academic journal, there will be a literature review discussing all the articles that have been written before, an identification of what's not known that the researchers could look into, and then primary research. So primary research is absolutely fundamental to the entire academic effort. Primary sources include things that come directly from the people or organizations involved and aren't filtered for publication. So it isn't that someone has written an article about it, which you read. Instead, you read the original documentation. Or sometimes the researchers create the primary documentation themselves. For example, they do an experiment and then they have experiment results. But in any case, you have to have a primary source if you're doing top-of-the-line research, so that's why I want you to experiment a little bit with them if possible on this paper. Common primary sources include things like surveys and interviews, reviewing any kind of papers which were never intended for circulation to the public, so they're private, they're unfiltered, experiments, observations, and case studies where a specific individual, for example, is studied in depth. That's a case study. In Comp 2, students tend to focus on surveys, interviews, and observations, so we'll talk about those a little more specifically. To give a survey, I would recommend just writing a few short and direct questions with yes/no answers or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 type answers, but I would put one open-ended question at the bottom, like, what's your general impression, or do you have anything else you'd like to say? Something like that. That can give you good quotations. I would say give it to at least 20 people in your target audience, so not just 20 random people, but 20 people who would know something about the problem that you're researching. And always get permission to give the survey from whoever is in charge of those 20 people. For example, if you give it at a class, get permission from the instructor. And always tell people that it's optional to participate. But I find that people will participate if it's short, if it's only a couple questions. Interviews are another thing that Comp 2 students sometimes do. To do an interview, you want to, first of all, you want to make sure you have very good notes, okay, of when and where you did the interview and everything that was said. Get permission to record if you can, but even if you have permission to record, take notes. That'll help you stay focused on your next question and focused on the speaker. Remember that anyone with direct experience who has a sound mind, in other words, an average adult with direct experience, is a worthwhile interview topic if they're going to say something interesting to you. If you need to, you can use an assumed name when you write the paper for privacy. So you would just say, my interview subject, I'll call him Stanley, and that way you can use an assumed name. A few other points about interviews. It's good to have a list of open-ended questions, not in this case yes, no, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but something where you're going to encourage the person to give you a few sentences in response. But don't feel like you have to stick to that list. Just go where the interview goes, ask questions that would seem to get the next batch of good comments from the person. So follow that person's lead and follow along where the questions take you. Another useful tool for students is the observation. Again, you would make very thorough notes about the date and the time. Give yourself an adequate amount of time to sit and make the observation, and try not to make it obvious what you're doing, because that can affect people's behavior. So just try to be unobtrusive. And then write down, if you can, any specific things that people say or do as you're observing. Things that you might observe would be like, how will students respond to whatever situation, an increase in tuition? And then you could sit near registration and you could make an observation of the comments people make as they come out after paying, or something like that. So anything that would relate to your research topic where you could do a direct observation would work. And of course, it wouldn't have to just be at school, it could be out in the community.